There is no wound in the human heart quite like abandonment, and there is no abandonment that cuts deeper than the one that comes from a mother. We grow up believing that a mother's love is the one thing in the world that does not leave. It is the constant, the anchor. And when it disappears, when a child wakes up one morning and the person who was supposed to be the most permanent figure in their life is simply gone, something breaks that is very hard to repair. But sometimes the full story is more complicated than the wound makes it seem. Sometimes the truth behind a disappearance is not abandonment at all. Sometimes it is sacrifice. And sometimes the difference between those two things does not become clear until many years later, in a place, and at a moment that nobody could have predicted. On a warm Wednesday afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia, a woman named Gloria Simmons walked onto the stage of Family Feud. She was 58 years old. She was dressed carefully, the way people dress when they want to show respect for an occasion. And she was carrying something that no one in that studio could see: 15 years of silence and the weight of a decision that had cost her more than anything else in her life. By the time Gloria left that stage, there was not a dry eye in the building. Steve Harvey himself had to step away from his mark and compose himself before he could speak. And when the episode aired, over 14 million people watched the moment that television producers later called one of the most quietly devastating and ultimately beautiful things they had ever captured on camera. This is Gloria's story, and it begins, as so many important stories do, with a choice made in the dark. Subscribe now and hit that like button, because by the end of this, you will understand why some of the most profound acts of love in the world look, from the outside, like the opposite of love entirely. Gloria Simmons was born in Savannah, Georgia, the third of 5 children in a family that did not have much money but had, as she would later say, an abundance of everything that actually matters. Her father worked the docks. Her mother cleaned houses 6 days a week. Both of them were home every single evening for dinner without exception. Loyalty was not a word the Simmons family discussed. It was simply what they did. Gloria married young, at 22, to a man named Robert who was charming and funny and in the early years genuinely kind. They had a daughter together in 1994. They named her Amara. And for the first 4 years of Amara's life, Gloria poured everything she had into that little girl. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every first word and first step, Gloria was there for all of it. Then things with Robert changed. It did not happen overnight. It rarely does. But by the time Amara was 5, the marriage had become something that bore no resemblance to what it had started as. Robert's behavior had grown controlling, then frightening, and eventually dangerous in ways that Gloria had worked hard to keep away from her daughter. She had protected Amara from the worst of it. What she could not protect her from was what came next. When Amara was 7 years old, Gloria made the decision that would define the next 15 years of both their lives. She left, not because she wanted to leave her daughter, but because she had been told by a doctor, by a social worker, and finally by a judge, that leaving without Amara was the only way to build the legal and financial foundation she needed to come back and take her daughter safely and permanently. She left with nothing. No money, no stable address, nowhere to go. She spent the first 3 months sleeping on the couch of a cousin in Memphis. She worked 2 jobs, she saved. She filed legal paperwork that went nowhere for 2 years, then 3, then 4. She called Amara on birthdays until Robert changed the number. She sent letters until they started coming back unopened. From Amara's perspective, her mother had simply gone. No explanation that a 7-year-old could understand. No goodbye that made sense, just absence. Amara was raised by Robert and his mother. She grew into a composed, quietly guarded young woman who had learned early not to expect permanence from people she loved. She had not spoken to Gloria in over a decade when a mutual family friend reached out and suggested, gently, carefully, that perhaps it was time. The Family Feud appearance had been arranged through that same family friend, who happened to know one of the show's segment producers. The idea was simple: bring Gloria and Amara together on neutral ground, in a setting that was structured and public, where neither of them would have to navigate the reunion alone. Amara, now 29, had agreed. Reluctantly, but she had agreed. What none of the producers fully anticipated was what Gloria was planning to say. The Webb, the Simmons family came in as a 5-person team, a setup that the producers had arranged thoughtfully. Gloria's sister Patricia was there, along with Patricia's husband, Amara's childhood friend Destiny, and a young cousin named Darius who kept the energy light whenever the room grew heavy. Amara stood with them, close to Patricia, maintaining a careful physical distance from her mother that told its own story. Steve Harvey noticed the dynamic immediately. He had a gift, developed over decades in front of audiences, for reading the emotional temperature of a room. He knew within 30 seconds of the Simmons family walking out that this was not a typical episode. He kept the opening light, moving through the main game with warmth and humor, giving everyone space to settle. Gloria played with everything she had. She was sharp and focused and competitive in the way that people are when they are trying very hard to do something right. Amara played well too, with a cool precision that occasionally drew genuine admiration from the audience. At one point, Steve asked Amara where she got her composure from. Amara paused for just a half-second before answering, "From having to figure things out on my own, I guess." The audience laughed. It was the kind of laugh that covers a wince. Gloria did not react visibly, but Patricia, standing beside her, reached over and put a hand briefly on her arm. The Simmons family won the main game. The audience cheered. Steve celebrated with them. And as the celebration settled, he moved toward the fast money podium and gestured for the two designated players to step forward. Gloria and Amara exchanged a look across the stage. It was the longest direct eye contact they had held in 15 years. Amara broke it first. Gloria stepped to the podium. She scored 119 points, good, but not enough. Amara would need 81 more to win the $20,000. She stepped up. The audience was quiet with anticipation. She went through the 5 questions steadily, answering without hesitation. When the final board was revealed, number 1 answer, the winning points secured, the studio erupted. But before the cheering had fully crested, Gloria had stepped forward. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her chin was up, and she was looking directly at her daughter. "Amara," she said, her voice clear and carrying across the studio, "before we leave this stage, I need to say something to you, in front of all these people. Because I have tried to say it in private for years and I kept losing my nerve, and you deserve to hear it. You have always deserved to hear it." The audience stilled so quickly it was almost startling. Steve Harvey took one slow step back, giving the stage to them both. Gloria did not rush. She had rehearsed this in her mind for years, but standing in front of the cameras, in front of Amara's guarded face, it came out differently than it ever had in practice. It came out raw. "When you were 7 years old, she began, I left. And I know what that felt like for you. I know because I have imagined it every single day since. A little girl waking up and her mother not being there, no real explanation, no goodbye that made any sense." Amara's expression had not changed, but her stillness had deepened into something different. She was listening, really listening. "What I need you to know," Gloria continued, "is why, not as an excuse. There is no excuse for the years of silence, for the letters that came back, for the birthdays I missed, for the graduations I was not at. I am not standing here asking you to erase any of that. I am standing here asking you to add something to it. The part I could never find a way to tell you." She paused, her voice steadied. "I left because I was told by a social worker, by a legal advocate, by a judge, that if I took you with me the night I fled, your father's attorneys would have had me arrested within 48 hours, and I would have lost all legal standing to fight for you. I left with nothing so that I could build something, so that I could come back through the courts with documentation, with stable housing, with a legal case that could not be dismissed. I spent 4 years trying to do exactly that." She exhaled slowly. "And then I failed, not because I stopped trying, but because I ran out of money, out of attorneys willing to work pro bono, and eventually out of legal options in the state of Georgia. I kept calling, I kept writing, and when the letters came back and the numbers changed, I did not stop loving you. I just ran out of roads." Amara's eyes were bright. Her jaw was tight. One tear had escaped and was making its way down her cheek, and she was clearly willing herself not to follow it with another. "I have spent 15 years," Gloria said softly, "being called every name that a woman can be called for leaving her child. And I accepted that, because from the outside, that is exactly what it looked like. But you are not on the outside, Amara. You are my daughter, and you are the only person on this earth whose understanding I have ever truly needed." For a moment, no one in the studio moved. Then Amara's composure, that carefully maintained, years in the making composure, broke, not with noise. With a single, quiet sob that the microphone caught perfectly. She covered her mouth with both hands. Her shoulders dropped, the way shoulders do when something they have been bracing against finally gives way. Gloria crossed the stage without waiting. She opened her arms, and Amara, the daughter who had spent 22 years learning how to need no one, walked into them. They held each other in the center of the Family Feud stage while 200 people in the audience sat in complete silence, many of them crying without sound, in the way that people cry when they are witnessing something too real and too private and too human to respond to with noise. Steve Harvey stood off to the side. His hand was pressed flat against his chest. When he finally spoke, after nearly 90 seconds of silence, his voice was not its usual register. It was quieter, more careful. He said, "I have hosted this show for a long time. I have seen a lot of things happen on this stage, but I need you all to understand what you just witnessed. That was not a television moment. That was a mother and a daughter finding each other, and we were just lucky enough to be in the room." He paused. Gloria, you did not owe this audience your story. You gave it anyway, because you wanted your daughter to hear it where she could not walk away. That was brave. That was the bravest thing I have seen on this stage. He looked at Amara. And you came here today not knowing exactly what was going to happen. You could have walked away from all of it. You didn't. That matters. The audience erupted not in the sharp game show burst of celebration, but in something slower and warmer and more sustained. The kind of applause that means more than approval. The kind that means we see you. The $20,000 went into a joint account that Gloria and Amara opened together the following week. It was, Gloria said later, the first thing they had ever owned together since Amara was a child. They used part of it to cover Amara's car repairs. She had been driving on 2 worn tires for months, and part of it to fund a weekend trip to Savannah, where Gloria showed Amara the house she had grown up in, the dock where her grandfather had worked, and the church where Amara had been baptized as an infant. It was the first trip they had ever taken together as adults. When the episode aired 8 weeks after the taping, it became the most watched Family Feud clip of that year. The segment was shared across social media millions of times, not because it was dramatic in the way that television usually engineers drama, but because it was real in a way that television rarely is. People recognized something in Gloria's confession, the particular grief of trying to explain an impossible choice to someone who bore the cost of it. And they recognized something in Amara's response, the particular courage of choosing to stay in the room when every instinct built by years of hurt is telling you to leave. The response from viewers was unlike anything the Family Feud production team had seen. They received thousands of letters and messages from adult children who had been separated from parents by circumstances beyond anyone's control, from mothers who had made impossible choices and lived with the silence ever since, and from family court advocates who used the clip in training materials as an illustration of how the legal system can fracture families in ways that leave no clear villain and no clean resolution. One letter that Gloria has shared publicly came from a woman in Detroit who wrote that she had not spoken to her own mother in 19 years. She watched the episode 3 times. Then she picked up the phone. Steve Harvey devoted a segment of his talk show to the story the following month. He spoke about Gloria with a directness and seriousness that was different from his usual television persona, more personal, more considered. He said that the moment had prompted him to call someone in his own family with whom he had unfinished business. He did not say who. He did not need to. Gloria and Amara began seeing a family therapist together 2 months after the taping. Neither of them has described it as easy. Amara has been honest in interviews about the fact that a single conversation, even one as powerful as what happened on that stage, does not undo 22 years. The anger is real. The grief is real. The work is ongoing. But she has also said this: I spent my whole adult life believing that my mother made a choice between me and her own freedom, and that her freedom won. Hearing the actual story did not erase the years, but it changed what those years meant, and that changes everything. Gloria returned to Savannah after the taping and began volunteering with a local organization that provides legal assistance to low-income mothers navigating family court. She has said that if she had had access to those services in 1999, the trajectory of her life and Amara's might have been fundamentally different. She does not say this with bitterness. She says it with purpose. Amara attended one of Gloria's volunteer sessions 6 months after the taping. She sat in the back and did not say much. But at the end of the evening, she helped stack chairs. Gloria noticed. She did not make a point of it. She just noticed. On the 1-year anniversary of the episode's airing, the 2 women posted a photograph together on social media. They were sitting at a table in what appeared to be a kitchen, both of them with cups of tea, neither of them looking at the camera. They were looking at each other. The caption simply read, "Still figuring it out, together." It was shared over 200,000 times. Steve Harvey, who had by then developed an ongoing acquaintance with Gloria through mutual correspondence, sent her a message that she later read aloud in an interview. He wrote, "Gloria, you walked onto my stage carrying 15 years. You left it lighter. I hope it keeps getting lighter." The story of Gloria and Amara Simmons has since been referenced in academic discussions about family separation, the long-term consequences of domestic violence on parent-child relationships, and the role that public confession, structured, witnessed, irreversible, can play in breaking cycles of silence. A professor at Emory University cited the episode in a paper on restorative communication. A marriage and family therapist in Chicago began using the clip in group sessions for adult survivors of parental abandonment. But for Gloria herself, The most meaningful moment of the entire journey happened not on television and not in any interview. It happened on a Tuesday evening, roughly 8 months after the taping, when her phone rang. She answered, and on the other end was Amara's voice saying 4 words that she had not heard in 22 years. "Hi, Mom. It's me." Gloria sat down on her kitchen floor and did not get up for a long time. She did not need to. She had arrived. The story of Gloria and Amara Simmons is, at its core, a story about the danger of incomplete information, about how a life can be misread for decades because the most important chapter was never told. It is a story about the cost of silence, the courage of truth, and the extraordinary, unlikely grace that sometimes waits on the other side of a confession that comes too late and right on time. And it is a reminder, quiet, persistent, and necessary, that love does not always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it looks like absence. Sometimes it looks like a woman in a careful dress standing on a game show stage, finally finding the words she needed 22 years ago. If this story stayed with you, please like this video and subscribe. These are the stories that remind us what we are all capable of. We will see you in the next one.